Hey, it's Keisha. Welcome and welcome back. We're on our next reading in the Aquarian. It'll be chapters 129 and 130. So let's take a moment to center. So close our eyes and just take a deep breath in and let it out. Another deep breath in and out. The next deep breath in, begin to collect and gather all the parts of yourselves you've left in different conversations and situations since the last time we spoke. Just bring all of that power back to yourself. Gently and lovingly call all of yourself back. Notice how with each breath you become more full and more present. And now ask that anything that is not of the Christed consciousness, anything that is not for your highest and best, ask it to leave you now. Any cares or concerns, release those. Feel them drifting out of your mind, out of your worries and care. Feel yourself present and whole. And now see a column of light coming down over you. Breathe in that light. Feel it quickening the cells in the body. Feel yourself enlivened and more radiant. And gently lift up in that column. Lift up higher and higher. Releasing the binds of earth. Releasing those attachments. Feel yourself free, whole, and light. When you find yourself in a place of openness and receptivity, oneness and love, gently open your eyes and we'll begin our reading. So the news soon spread that Jesus and the 12 were come, and many people came to see. And Jesus said, "Behold, you come to see, but that means not. If you have the benedictions of the Christ, take up your cross and follow me. If you would give your life for selfish self, then you will lose your life. If you will give your life in service of your fellow men, then you will save your life. This life is but a span, a bauble of today. There is a life that passes not. Where is your profit if you gain the world and lose your soul? What would you take in payment for your soul? If you would find the spirit of life, the life of God in man, then you must walk a narrow way and enter through a narrow gate. The way is Christ, the gate is Christ, and you must come by the way of Christ. No man comes unto God but by the Christ. The kingdom of the Christ will come. Yea, some of you who hear me will not pass through the gates of death until you see the kingdom come in power." For 7 days the Master and the 12 remained in Caesarea Philippi. Then Jesus, taking Peter, James, and John, went forth into the mountaintop to pray. And as he prayed, a brilliant light appeared, and his form became as radiant as a precious stone. His face shone like the sun, His garment seemed as white as snow. The Son of Man became the Son of God. He was transfigured that the men of earth might see the possibilities of man. When first the glory came, the 3 disciples were asleep. A master touched their eyes and said, "Awake and see the glory of the Lord." And they awoke and they awoke and saw the glory of the Lord, and more, they saw the glory of the heavenly world, for they beheld 2 men from thence stand forth beside the Lord. And Peter asked the master who awakened them, "Who are these men who stand beside the Lord?" And the master said, "These men are Moses and Elijah, who are come that you may know that heaven and earth are one, that masters there and masters here are one. The veil that separates the worlds is but an ether veil. For those who purify their hearts by faith, the veil is rolled aside, and they can see and know that death is an elusive thing." And Peter said, "Praise God." And then he called to Jesus and he said, "My Master and my Lord, this is the gate of heaven. It is well that we remain. We may go down and bring 3 tents, a tent for you, a tent for Moses and Elijah one. We may go down and bring 3 tents, a tent for you, a tent for Moses, and for Elijah one." But Jesus answered not. And Moses and Elijah talked with Jesus on the mount. They talked about the coming trial of the Lord, about his death, his rest within the tomb, about the wonders of the resurrection morn, the transmutation of his flesh, and his ascension into the clouds of light. And all symbolic of the path that every man must tread, symbolic of the way the sons of men become the sons of God. The 3 disciples were amazed, and suddenly the ethers were surcharged with song, and forms as light as air moved about the mountaintop. And then from out of the glory of the upper world they heard a voice that said, "This is the Son of Man, my chosen one to manifest the Christ to men. Let all the earth hear him." When the disciples heard the voice, they were afraid. They fell upon the ground and prayed. And Jesus came, he touched them, and he said, "Arise, fear not. Lo, I am here." Then they arose, and as they looked about, they saw no one. The men had gone. The master only stood with them. As Jesus and the 3 came from the mountaintop, they talked about the meaning of the scene, and Jesus told them all. And then he said, "Till I have risen from the dead, tell not anyone what you have seen." But the disciples could not comprehend the meaning of the words, "till I have risen from the dead." And Jesus told them once again about his death and rising from the grave, and about the kingdom of the soul that was to come in glory and in power. But Peter said, "The scribes have taught that over the king shall come, Elijah must appear." And Jesus said, "Elijah has already come, but scribes and Pharisees received him not." And men reviled him, bound him, cast him in a prison cell, and shouted with the fiend's delight to see him die. "What men have done to him, they will do to me." Then the disciples understood that Jesus spoke of John, whom Herod slew. When Jesus, Peter, and James and John were come into the city's gates, a multitude of people thronged the way. The 9 apostles who went not with Jesus to the mount had tried to heal an epileptic child who was obsessed, and they failed. And the people waited for the coming of the Lord. When Jesus came, the father of the child knelt down before him and implored his help. He said, "My master, I beseech that you will look in pity on my son, my only child. He's an epileptic child and suffers grievously. Sometimes he falls into the fire and is burned. Again he falls into the water and he is like to drown. And many times a day he falls, he grinds his teeth, and foam pours out of his mouth. I took my child to your disciples, and they failed to give relief." And as he spoke, a servant brought the child before the Lord. The child spoke not, for he was dumb. And instantly he fell upon the ground and foamed, and he writhed in agony. And Jesus said, How long has he been troubled thus?" And the father said, "From infancy. And we have sought in many lands for help, but found it not. But I believe that you can speak the word and heal my son." And Jesus said, "Faith is the power of God. All things are possible for him who has in his heart belief." All things are possible for him who in his heart believes. The father cried in tears, "Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief." And Jesus spoke the word of power. The epileptic child lay in a swoon. And he did not breathe, and all the people said, "The child is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and said, "Arise." And he arose and spoke. The people were amazed, and many said, "This surely is a man of God, for no such power has ever been given to man." Then Jesus and the 12 went to the house, and after they had taken food and been refreshed, the 9 disciples said, "Lord, why could we not heal this child? We spoke the word, but even that was powerless." And Jesus said, "Your great success and all your former work has made you careless, and you forget to recognize the power of God. Without the spirit of the word is like an idle tale, and you forgot to pray. There is no faith without the power. No, there is no faith without the prayer of faith. Faith is the wings of prayer, but wings alone cannot fly. By prayer and faith, you can bring down the mountain peaks and cast them into the sea. The little hills will skip about like lambs at your command. This failure may be for you. The greatest lessons that are learned in life come through failures that are made. As the disciples sat in thoughtful meditation, Jesus said, "Let these words sink into your hearts. The time has nearly come when you must bear your load alone, that is, without my presence in the flesh. For I will fall into the hands of wicked men, and they will slay me on a mount beyond the wall. And men will lay my body in a tomb where, by the sacred word, it will be guarded and preserved 3 days, and then I will rise again." The 12 were sad. They did not understand, and yet they feared to ask him to reveal the meaning of his word. Next day, the Christine Master and the 12 began their journey of return, and soon were in Capernaum. It seems like with each successive reading, we get deeper and deeper into the meaning of why all of this is happening. So going back to like the beginning of 129, Jesus said, if you would have the blessings and benedictions of Christ, take up your cross and follow me. Take up your crosses, take your burdens, and follow me. Follow my teachings. Do what I do. Get on track with your life. Get on your purpose, right? And then he talks about that purpose being that of service, where if you give your life in service to your fellow man, then you will save your life. But if you give your life to self or self, then you will lose it. So true life lived is one that's given through service. And then he goes on to say, the famous line, I think it's in Hebrews in the King James and Lamsa Bible. What does it profit the world and the man if you sell your soul? What payment would you take for it? So in order to find the spirit life and that life of God, it's a narrow path. And, I'm reading this with my own, thinking about the things that I'm experiencing and going through. And the path is indeed narrow, my friends. Sometimes I don't even think there's room for my feet to fit on it. Certainly not side by side, and barely one in front of the other, because this just seems to be the way things are constructed at the moment. So that's definitely some food for thought. And then he talks again, we hear again and again, death is an elusive thing. And even, when he's sitting with Peter, James, and John, and they have the opportunity to see his transfiguration, it's so beyond the scope of their consciousness that they fall asleep. And I don't know if you've had this experience. I know I've had this when I would be in church sometimes, where I'm listening to the message, listening, and I'm wide awake, and, it's not for lack of sleep, but I find my eyes closing because I'm listening so deep to the message that I can't hear it and feel it with my eyes open, trying to watch what's happening in front of me on the stage. And so I close my eyes, and I'm hearing, but I'm not hearing with my ears. I'm hearing with my heart and my being. And to everyone else, it looks like, oh, you're sleeping. But no, it's like I'm getting the message is so big and so deep that it's beyond my common consciousness, that I need to release the bounds of like this earthly existence to let myself be bigger so that I can take it all in. And that's what happens with the three of them. They're not able to see and hold the message, and they end up falling asleep. And only once he's transfigured does he go in and he taps them on their eyes to open them, right? To help them see, this bigger consciousness of what is possible. And there they see Moses and Elijah. And it's so funny, like even they've been with the master for so long now. They've seen so many miracles, but and he's told them so many times of what's about to happen. They still can't seem to comprehend when they step into these other levels of consciousness, because they ask about bringing down tents for Moses and Elijah. It's like, on the one hand, they understand that they're spirit, but on the other hand, they can't comprehend the magnitude of that spirit, and so their way of understanding that is to make them human and to ask if they need these human things like tents. And again, we get the recounting of what is going to happen, that he's going to be killed, and after 3 days in the tomb, he's going to resurrect and then ascend. So we have, it's not foreshadowing. I mean, he's telling you directly, and yet we're still not, through the disciples' eyes, we're still not seeing it. And again, the disciples have been with Jesus for so long, they still don't understand. They're trying to, they know the prophecy of a king, and so they're still thinking about an earthly king and all the things that the prophecy talks about in leading up to a king coming. They still miss, even though they've lived in the experience. And so they watch the death of John and think that that's, they're waiting for Elijah to come forth before the king does. And only as Jesus continues to tell them the story do they realize, oh, John was Elijah come forth again. This has already happened. And they still can't see the Christ as king without it being an earthly king, in terms of being on a throne with lots of jewels and the trappings. It's hard to see what's right in front of you sometimes, I think. Going on to chapter 130, this is where the disciples, in Jesus' absence, the other 9, aren't able to heal the epileptic child. And they ask why, and it's like, because you forgot to pray. And this was something, as I'm reading and I'm thinking about all these times that this has happened, we've manifested something magnificent. We've had the answer to our prayer. We move into this new state of being, and then all of a sudden it stops, and we can't seem to function in the same way that we were before. And it's because when we were having a hard time and struggling and being in that space where we needed to pray, we were on our game. Like, that path is narrow. You have to remain in prayer. You have to continue with your meditation. You have to do the process. You have to maintain that high vibration. And so when things are tough and you're going through it, you're doing all those things because you want to get out of it. And as soon as, there's a break in the clouds and you break through, we put down the practices we were doing because we just want to relax and want to live a little bit. And then we try to move back to that space of being creator, and it doesn't work. And it's because we forgot to pray. We forgot to, maintain those practices. So when he talks about, it's a prayer, there's, prayer and faith are like, wings are like prayer. Is that what the thing is? Wings alone cannot fly. So yeah, faith is the wings of prayer, but wings alone cannot fly. You have to marry faith with your prayer in order for it to go forth and manifest. So we have to maintain our discipline. We have to maintain our faith and continue to pray and ask for Spirit to move through us if we want to see the results of Spirit blessedness. And I wrote in my little notes here, I wrote things I had forgotten, because every time I read this, I remember, because I'm usually going through something, right? And it's like, oh, right, am I maintaining all of my practices? Have I been on my game when it comes to praying and meditating? And this comment was made 2014. No, 2011, 2012. And I'm reading it again today, 2023. And things I had forgotten is still holding true, which is not to say that I'm not consistent in my practice, but obviously I'm not. So much like the disciples who have been told what's going to happen, but can't seem to understand what's going on, I too am just as human and have fallen back into that space of not engaging on every level, because the path is so narrow and so hard. I do these readings for you, and I do them for me. So what a great lesson. What a great teacher we have. And then he goes on to say, what is the truth, or what that which is true, that has been true for all the ages, that failure is the best teacher. And I'll read it again. It's 130, verse 21. This failure may be well for you. The greatest lessons that are learned in life come through the failures that are made. There's not much to be learned from your successes, because once you have it, you seem to go on to the next thing. But when there's failure, it's like you reassess where you've been and what you can be doing differently and better. And that's where the real opportunity lies. Personally, I'm looking for a little less failure at the moment, but I'm taking my W's. I'm taking my L's as I'm taking my W's. With grace and humility, employing ever more patience and faith that we're going to turn this L into a W. So there we are. I'll be back with our next reading when I'm back. We'll see you then. Love you in the meantime. Bye.